This is your World War III update, and we are in a lot of trouble. I just have to ask myself sometimes, how did we get here? How did we get ourselves into a situation whereby you have the biggest exchanges of missiles and drones in all of human history, numerous times over the past week, an assassination on Vladimir Putin, the president of a country who has the most nuclear weapons in the world, and a massive military transport aircraft exodus from Moscow, 17 aircraft leaving to the Ural Mountains in what some were saying was an exercise. Although all of this is happening simultaneous with these massive exchanges between Ukraine and Russia. We are seeing the most insidious, incremental run up the escalation ladder, and many people are confused in believing that that means that this is a managed escalation and that the stakes aren't getting progressively higher. Here's the thing. The stakes are getting progressively higher, even though we are becoming more and more inattentive and disinterested into how this thing is progressing. And I have warned people since day one that it wouldn't matter if Trump won or not with respect to the Russia-Ukraine war. Everyone was saying, Nate, you're being too pessimistic. Trump's going to end the war. I said, no, he wasn't. I said that every single day to my own detriment, losing hundreds of thousands of followers. And now all these dick riders are going to come on and act as if they knew the whole time, or they're going to rationalize it in some other way. But as we get close, at the time of making this video right now, Trump just sent out another tweet basically admonishing Putin for these attacks that we are seeing. So Putin has said "niet" to Trump, and here we are. We are now at a point which is so perilous in that the amount of off-ramps that exists are becoming less and less, and the stakes are getting higher and higher for both sides. Whether that's the collapse of Ukraine or the fact that Ukraine, leveraging U.S. satellite data, is targeting Russia with a record number of drones over the span of 48 hours, 788 drones. All of that authorized by the POTUS. Okay, and people actually believe this bullshit that's being fed to them by the government that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump are going to work this out with a phone call. Well, here we are. We're in a situation that under Biden, if any of this had happened, people would be losing their shit. The same people who used to follow me would be in their bunkers if I would have told them that Moscow was doing a massive exodus of their top brass. This all happened over the weekend. You can go and research it. Okay, it happened. This is open source intelligence. All the while, the biggest volleys, salvos of missiles, drones, ballistic missiles in history. All the while, an assassination attempt on Vladimir Putin himself. This is madness. And it's only going to get worse. And the scary part is, again, that there's an inverse relationship between people's interest in what's happening and how close we are actually getting to somebody overstepping a red line, a real red line. Now, it could be that that Moscow evacuation exercise that we'll talk about in just a moment was an exercise, but it also could be some sort of signaling, right? Because throughout the Cold War, both sides communicated with each other by doing certain things. So rolling out a nuke somewhere, like one of the mobile nuclear platforms, running an exercise, issuing anatoms, doing something like this where you have a lot of high-ranking Russian official aircraft with their transponders on going to the Ural Mountains, as if to suggest to the United States that maybe you're getting a little too close, and to get them to maybe pull back with whatever it is they're authorizing Ukraine to do. So this thing is escalating out of control. And just like the frog in the boiling pot of water, until a major event happens, and now it's going to be starkly contrasted amidst what appears to be, if you're watching Western media only, a relatively calm and pacified situation. But anything but the truth actually is what's going on. In fact, Kiev is starting to resemble more and more of what the Gaza Strip looks like. And it's not a surprise to me that we now have these new press procedures at the Pentagon. Of course, it's perhaps a little bit of overreach. Pete Hegseth trying to cover his own ass for his blunder on Signal recently. But recently, the Pentagon announced additional credentialing procedures for press at the Pentagon in the interest of national security. Well, most people just kind of glazed over that, but I would say that that's because they're getting ready to prepare for war and they want to control narratives. So be prepared for some major developments to unfold. And things could become very intractable in the days and weeks ahead. Because Trump, I don't even listen to Trump because it's just a lot of equivocation. And the people who do quote him, in the sense that they say, well, Trump said this, so this. I mean, what's the point at this point? Because the guy contradicts himself every other day. And you can't even really look at Trump. There is vacancies within government that need to be filled. And oftentimes those vacancies in your administration are likely going to be filled by the people who are competent are also people who are on the take. And that is classic case in point, Marco Rubio, who's a hardline neocon, who wants to go to war with Russia, who wants to go to war with Iran. And maybe Trump picked him for lack of better option, for all we know. But what we do know is that administration is stacked with a lot of very hawkish people that doesn't matter how many deals Trump just wants to do and what his best intentions are. You know, the overwhelming momentum of American foreign policy is moving towards more and more conflict. And they're going to do it in roundabout ways so to try to continue this insidious, incremental, gradualism towards the big proverbial day X that we know we're inexorably hurtling towards. We just don't know exactly what the pathway is going to be to get there. But it's self-evident to me and many people who are well apprised of these situations that ultimately East versus West will reach a pinnacle of conflict, an apex of conflict. And that is what I colloquially refer to as Day X, because it's the day when the first shot gets fired. And of course, it's presumed that after the first shot gets fired, several more get fired in rapid succession, and we make a run up the escalation ladder. Now, we hope that it is going to be more gradual, that incrementalism is going to continue even after the first nuclear weapon is utilized. And I think in light of my story that I talked about last week, not my story, but the story that I was sharing with you last week about the airports requesting more insurance for the use of a limited regional tactical nuclear war so that they could continue with their planes in the air, I think we very well may see the normalization of low-yield tactical nuclear weapons. And this is part of the reason why Russia is currently outfitting their aircraft with air-to-air nuclear missiles. So everybody's getting ready to fight a nuclear war, but Western countries were completely oblivious. And something that needs reiteration is the fact that there's so many fundamental beliefs that are flawed in Western society because of the Western exceptionalist propaganda and brainwashing. Chief among them is this idea that our government actually cares about us, because we believe that we are the sanctimonious ones, that the government's taking care of its population here in the West is sacrosanct, and we are more virtuous than those, barbarian hordes in the East who don't care about their populations and just view them as expendable. And while there is a certain amount of truth in that the government knows that we don't have the human resources to kind of throw at wars in the same way that some of the Slavic countries appear to be okay with doing. The notion that the government is going to tell you when the shit is going to hit the fan is something that is worthy of a rerun on this channel. And I talk about it a lot. They're not going to tell you jack diddly squat. And, show me a reason why. Prove to me that they're going to tell you, especially when we're this close. Okay? People just think, well, nothing has happened yet, right? And, 1,000 drones going on Moscow. Well, nothing has happened yet. 2,000 drones and weekly evacuation exercises and weekly assassination attempts. Well, nothing has happened yet, right? But that's where we are. If 1 year ago I told you those three things were happening, a Moscow evacuation exercise of the highest ranking officials to the nuclear command and control bunker, an assassination on Vladimir Putin, and 788 drones heading into Moscow's direction. If I would have told you all of that, you would have been like, it would have been a no-brainer. There would have been grocery stores. People would be ransacking the stores. It would be total pandemonium and chaos. And here we are today, doesn't even make the news. So that bears repeating. It really, we really got to put in perspective the nature of the situation that we're currently in. Because we are so close, and that's just one front, okay? Now, get into the details of what is going on, and I want to give you guys a heads up before I go further and do the deep dive. We're going to be separating the channels between the blue strip actionable content, the how-to, the preparedness, the family-friendly PG-13 stuff, and the daily updates and the interviews with guests. The reasons are mostly algorithmic, but what we're finding is that these two things are kind of working against each other. So I'll do a gear review video. We'll do a family-friendly, G-rated, we're having fun type video. And the people who want the current events analysis and the guests and the commentary, they're not really interested in that. And then you have a certain subsection of people where there is that overlap where they like both videos. But it seems as though we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot over and over again. So this new channel, and this is a big commitment. This isn't, I've done in the past, I've kind of off the cuff made a channel here and there, and I've never, really stuck with it. This, we're going all in. So this is a split. So no longer are you going to get the daily updates like this one on this channel starting next Wednesday. It's going to be happening fast. And I might do a periodic one on this channel just to kind of help migrate that viewership over to that channel. But it's something that has to happen because we're getting really nuked by the algorithm for our other videos, which, in my opinion, are more important. But I understand why people want to get this information because it's just not there. And sometimes it's delivered with an agenda on other channels that we don't do. And I always try to give you guys the truth to the best of the extent that I can see it. So that channel is going to be called The Prepper News. And we already bought the domain. So tough luck, anybody who wants to jump on that opportunity to steal the domain and then try to sell it to us at top dollar. The Prepper News. And yeah. So it's going to be a big thing right now. If you go subscribe to the channel, I'll post a link. There's no artwork. There's no decals. There's probably not even any subscribers on it. You might be the first. If you are, thank you very much. But just expect that that's going to be fully finished in about a week's time. And the first video that's going to be released is next Wednesday. And I believe that's going to be an interview with Brian Berlenik on that day. So you're not going to want to miss that. All right. Okay. So in terms of what's going on over the weekend, with respect to what transpired with Russia and Ukraine. A few more details with respect to that. 17 military transport aircraft with the Russian Air Force departed Moscow heading east towards the Ural Mountains. A variety of different planes, including Ilyushin 76s, Antonov 148s, Tupolev's 154s, 134s, 214s, etc., etc. Almost all of those aircraft are used to transport senior government and military officials, though the reason for leaving Moscow in the flurry of drone strikes that were targeting all throughout the Russian region by Ukraine, the reason is not known, but it could be a part of some exercise to test the evacuation of Russian officials to a safe location, a nuclear command and control bunker, in the case of a large-scale attack on Moscow. Now, Russia has been stepping up its nuclear emergency preparedness for many years. We've seen numerous unprecedented events, including a full-on preparation for a Mad Max full nuclear war mutually assured destruction scenario, which took place about 18 months ago. Putin's helicopter was also attacked by drones and had to repel a massive attack by Ukrainian enemy drones in the Kursk region when Putin was visiting there earlier in the week. They conducted an anti-aircraft battle to ensure the safety of the president's helicopter in the air, according to the commander of the Air Defense Division, Yuri Dashkin. These events took place during Putin's trip to the Kursk region earlier this week. According to Dashkin, the president was on board the helicopter during the drone attack. Now, they've attempted to assassinate Vladimir Putin or send him a message on numerous occasions, okay? They've been firing these drones at his villas, at his dachas, whatever you want to call them. They've been, targeting the Kremlin. There has been some conspiracies to assassinate him broken up and discovered over the last couple years. And it's only a matter of time before a red line is crossed. And again, it's important to remember that the stakes continuously get higher and higher, regardless of whether or not we pay attention to the matter. So just because something hasn't escalated things beyond a red line in the past doesn't mean they're not increasingly more likely to do so in the future. German troops are planning for their permanent deployment in the Baltics. And just, kind of take all of this, just kind of look at the big picture of what's happening here. Okay, you have the French reconnaissance ships now patrolling the Baltics, and you also have Russian escorts for their shadow fleet currently underway in the Baltic. So that's new. Naval escorts in the Baltic. So that means that if and when they try to intercept or enforce these sanctions in the Baltics against the Russian shadow fleet, similar to what happened last week with Estonia, when Estonia attempted to board a Russian vessel and they were met with resistance by the Russian Air Force, an Su-34, I believe, you're going to potentially have a flashpoint in the Baltics, and perhaps that's what Europe wants. Recall that is the region, or it's a very large, ocean, but it's that was the region where Nord Stream took place. So you have today Merz doubling down, saying Germany's never going back to Nord Stream, so you can pretty much forget it. Meanwhile, the Germans are establishing a foothold on Russia's border. All right. In addition to that, you have Arctic air defense systems deployed, the U.S. Army's newest air defense system. Sergeant Stout conducted the first live-fire exercises in the Arctic alongside NATO allies during Formidable Shield Exercise 2025, showcasing integrated air and missile defense capabilities against low-altitude threats. That, of course, is right around the region with Finland, where tensions appear to be rising along the border there as NATO suspects that Russia is amassing force. Russia says that this is pure projection. In fact, it's just a response to NATO's amassing of force on the other side of the border. Russia, of course, is equipping its airplanes with air-to-air nuclear missiles right around the time when the United States rolls out its tactical nuclear B-13 is a B-61-13 gravity bomb, the newer version, a year ahead of schedule. All the while, Trump is now getting into spats with Vladimir Putin online. So how do you think that 24-hour ceasefire is going so far that we were promised at the onset of this administration? Russia's goal, according to Viktor Sobolyev of the Russian Parliament Defense Committee, says that the goal with a full-scale invasion of Ukraine is to create a single allied state of Russia, Ukraine, Belarus, and restore the Russian world within its natural borders. So there you go. There you have it. That's the end goal. And this new, what are they calling it, a buffer zone, which is an extension of the special military operation, will seek to essentially annex 8 territories. And it looks as though that is going to be initiated with a major operation, possible ground invasion into the Kharkov region. Now, they only have 50,000 troops amassed around a city of 1 million at this point in time. So I highly doubt that they have the manpower, but they do have about 250,000 guys just sitting in reserve, waiting to do something. We don't know exactly what. But again, the scenes over Kiev as of late are reminiscent of what we've been seeing in the Gaza Strip. And it's either a sign that Ukrainian air defense is failing, or Russia is just changing their strategy, and they're now actively targeting Ukraine's top officials. And that now the operation and the objectives have changed. Okay, so what else do we got going on here? Dmitry Medvedev commented on the Doomsday Radio, squawking out some rather ominous signals the other day. A coded message, he indicated that Doomsday Radio station, the May Benevolence, has been replaced with a ferocious grunt pull, whatever that means. Is that radio station operational when the Russians are starting some big arrow offensive, or is it an indication of a DEFCON level? Is it related to the exercises of Moscow egress that we recently seen with the military transport craft, or is it a sign that things really are escalating in the shadows between Russia and NATO, and they're not telling us how serious it is? At this point in time, I don't listen to anything Trump says. I don't listen to anything Western officials say, because everything they say is at odds with what we see. Trump is saying that he wants to resolve the war. Well, then why is it that he is aiding and abetting Ukraine, firing thousands of drones directly into Russia with the help of U.S. satellites? Okay, if Trump was serious about wanting to resolve this conflict, even if he was just getting ready to give the war to Vladimir Putin, which at this point he could. He could have done it, and he probably could have done it in a way where nobody would have held him accountable for what has transpired since early on, and nobody would have, there probably wouldn't have been a whole lot of resistance at that period of time, because so much was happening that kind of obscured what was going on in Ukraine. There was so much going on domestically. So why is there persistence there? It's for the reasons that I laid out before. He cannot leave. This conflict, the West views as existential. And a way to get to China is to get through Russia first. So no, Trump will not relent on his commitment to Ukraine. They're going to continue to provide weapons to Ukraine, but they're going to do it in a more roundabout way. Recall, the rare earth mineral deal is a do with the Lend-Lease. So it's basically a cover for Lend-Lease. Either Europe is going to provide Ukraine weapons and sell them, or this weapons deal with the Saudis is likely going to be, a lot of those weapons are going to make their way to Ukraine as well. And it's just a way to circumvent all of the critics who would be against sending weapons to Ukraine directly. But a lot of these weapon systems that they're sending to Saudi Arabia, it's like, why would Saudi Arabia ever need air-to-air missiles? I mean, who are they engaging in a dogfight with? if not for Iran. But even then, that's going to be a war with the United States, likely, or Israel and Iran, as opposed to Saudi Arabia. So I think Saudi Arabia is going to be the U.S. distributor for weapons. That way, the Ukrainians say they got them from the Saudis or whatever. In terms of what's going on in the Middle East, Lindsey Graham is openly calling now for the nuking of the Gaza Strip, if you could believe it. I mean, that's just dumb from a pragmatic point of view, because then you'd have nuclear fallout drifting back into Israel. And who would want to contaminate the space with radioactive particles for many generations to come, potentially? Now, a lot of that would dissipate, of course, but it just doesn't make any sense why you would nuke. I mean, if they were to do that and they somehow were able to maintain any political capital internationally, would be, I mean, at that point, I might just have to go off air, because anything is possible then. If you can nuke a country of defenseless people and get away with it, and nobody says anything, then imagine what our governments will do to us when the time comes. Put it that way. Israel has been moving weapons. Several batteries of air defense systems are being redeployed to critical areas, namely around the Nevatim Air Base and Tel Nof air bases. Now, why this is important, because this same maneuver was conducted prior to Israel doing an attack on Iran, which of course elicited an Iranian retaliatory strike on those air bases. So some are suspecting that Israel is getting ready to do an offensive against the Iranian nuclear facilities, and that will prompt an Iranian response, and they need to get those missile defense systems into place. That very well could be the case. According to Iranian officials, the talks that happened last minute, because they weren't supposed to happen in Rome, if you recall, but then they were resurrected at the last minute. Apparently they went well, but what we do know is that Witkoff had to leave those talks early. And so whatever sort of low-ranking dignitaries or delegation was left to consult with the Iranians were probably just telling them what they wanted to hear, because at that lower levels, I think a lot of the exchanges are far more hypothetical in nature and not dealing with a lot of the more challenging technical aspects. So you could have a lot of niceties exchanged between a low-level delegation, but when you get to the higher levels, that's when you start reaching those barriers to having any sort of diplomatic solution. And so I suspect that whatever happened, maybe it was a cordial exchange, but that doesn't mean that they were any closer to getting any sort of deal. And it appears as though that they're at an impasse. The Ukrainians don't want to relinquish any nuclear enrichment, and that is one of the primary demands of the United States. And Israel is saying, regardless of what happens, essentially they're going to attack anyways. Now, according to the IRGC Deputy Commander-in-Chief, General Ali Fadavi, he says, "Let me say it clearly. If Israel launches even the slightest attack on our facilities, we will put an end to its shameful existence." Today, I watched a video of Israel shooting a horse that some Palestinian was using in the Gaza Strip to transport stuff. There were a group of settlers outside the Gaza Strip having this barbecue so that the scent of the food would waft into the refugee camps inside the Gaza Strip, I guess just to troll the people who are starving in there. What else did I see? Oh yeah, I seen just a lot of people, freaking out in a really hysterical manner about nuking and committing widespread genocide. So yeah, that's been normalized now, and I guess we'll have to see what comes of it. I expect that there'll be some comeuppance at some point. In what shape or form, who knows? But a lot of these people in any form of religious extremism, they're just lunatics and they can't be reasoned with. And it's almost as if they have some sort of death wish, and you almost just have to let that situation play out. I'm not saying just turn a blind eye to the atrocities that are being committed there, but I have a sneaking suspicion that they've lost all soft power. And so if you're a person who is an advocate for that cause, just understand that, how can I say this? Evil ultimately destroys itself, put it that way, because it's just in its own nature. So, anyways, Vance canceled his Israeli trip because I think he didn't want to seem culpable if Israel did something, which I think could happen any day now, to be honest. Even Europe is saying that they don't trust the JCPOA process. Senior officials from the E3, which includes the United Kingdom, France, and Germany, recently presented concerns to the United States that they feel Iran is using the ongoing nuclear talks to stall the implementation of snapback sanctions under the JCPOA. And of course, Iran has stated that if snapback sanctions are put in place, which effectively take place if Iran doesn't fulfill its obligations under the deal, then any sort of sanctions relief will be reimposed. They're basically saying that if that happens, there's going to be dire consequences, whatever that means, political or military. Under the JCPOA, while continuing to advance its nuclear enrichment program towards a potential nuclear weapon, they claim. All right. There's been attacks across Europe on transformers over the weekend. Many of you probably heard there was 160,000 people left without power in Cannes, where they have the not Kanye, but I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, Cannes Film Festival after an attack against the transmission tower and transformer station. 50,000 people were without power in Nice after an attack against a transformer station. And Britain is also investigating arson and blackouts. 3 separate arson attacks targeted Keir Starmer's former homes and car. Now British officials are investigating if Russia lit the fuse, trying to implicate Russia in the crime. And Japan is seeing the highest rice prices on record. Apparently, Trump is pausing the tariffs on the EU for another month. So again, there's no sense in paying attention. It's pure market manipulation at this point in time. It's like they crash the market with puts and then they pump it. They get in on the lows, and it's pure market manipulation with this tariff stuff. And I know there's so many documented instances of insider trading that we've been seeing as of late. I don't talk about it a lot, but there's many incidents, too many to name, which signal that a lot of this stuff is just trying to game the markets. Nonetheless, the market is more overvalued than ever before. It's going to crash. It's just a matter of when. And if it doesn't crash, inflation will see that whatever gains it sustains are erased through inflation. So I would just encourage people to continue to prepare. Go check out the Prepper News channel if you want to keep apprised of what's going on. And we got a lot of great guests coming up next week. I think we have 5 or 6 guests lined up for next week, plus the daily updates. And then we're still got a lot of blue strip content for this channel. And I'm hoping that that's going to kind of turn the tides of the momentum on this channel, because, with respect to the blue strip content, I think it's really, being crushed by the daily updates, because the way YouTube algorithm works, if it thinks you're a news channel, then it's only pumping what I would call, your short-term annual type content, and that perennial content always tends to struggle. So if you're a hardcore prepper and you want that actionable content, stay here on this channel. If you want the updates, go to the Prepper News. Thanks for watching, guys. Talk soon. Canadian Prepper out.